In this episode of Another Zelda podcast, David is joined by Celeste Roberts to go over some listener feedback and answer some questions from a recent AMA. Hello and welcome to Another Zelda podcast. I am David Geisler, and tonight I am joined by Celeste Roberts via the internet. Celeste, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Oh man, Celeste, it was so weird in the pre-show. So our listeners might remember you. We speak about you all the time. If any of our listeners are familiar with our website, I think most know that you're actually the editor of all of our blogs on our website at anotherzeldapodcast.com. And so it's the strangest thing. You have been so intimately connected to the show and to the website, and you and I speak often about all these kind of behind-the-scenes things. And it blew my mind when we were setting up this episode because I realized that you have not been on the show for almost 2 years. The last and first time you were on our show was the kind of the group live episode we did at the Video Game Summit, I think 2018, maybe 2019. Video Game Summit. 2019. And you flew in from Louisiana and met with Kate and I at the Video Game Summit. And we did a live episode where we talked about water dungeons. Also with Lizzie was there. Lizzie Alstad was there. And my, oh my, it's been a while.
I know. That doesn't mean we don't talk to each other, though.
That's the thing that's weird is I realize like we talk all the time. And actually, I don't mind mentioning to our listeners that just recently you and I have been chatting, and we're actually bringing you on as a producer for season 4 of Another Zelda podcast. And I'm very, very grateful for the efforts and energy that you're going to be putting towards the show. But it just blows my mind that our listeners haven't heard you for quite some time. So welcome, even though it's weird because you're like kind of always here.
Well, I was on the quiz episode and the spooky spots episode.
That's fair. I guess we haven't had the conversation back and forth. So our listeners have been exposed to you even this season twice already, which is fair. I'm a little embarrassed now because I almost forgot about those 2 episodes. But the reason I forgot about those episodes, I love the quiz episodes. We're going to do more quiz episodes in the future, but those shows get built in such a different way from how we normally record these things. Quite frankly, usually it's Kate and I sitting at a dining room table or something like that, and then we just talk. It's all very organic and very natural. Whenever we do those quiz episodes, it's a week or 2 of prep, and then we're sending out files, and you guys are recording your own video, and you're sending them to me with your own audio, and then I'm putting everything through the editing stuff that I have over here. So those episodes are very, even though when they come together and the listeners listen, it feels all very cohesive. The truth is the pre-production and the production is actually quite disjointed.
Yeah, they're fun though. I really love them.
So I love them too. We're going to do more quiz episodes in the future. I am planning to do one with some of our top tier patrons that have been supporting us for a very, very long time. I think I'd kind of like to do a quote unquote celebrity quiz in season 4 by maybe reaching out to some of the other podcasts that have kind of befriended us along the way and just see if any of what their Zelda knowledge is like. And Celeste, certainly, I think we'll do more quiz episodes with the rest of what is now the regular cast, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. And last but not least, if in season 4 the world can spring back to life and we can start doing social events again and live events, oh my gosh, we have to. Maybe it's going to take till the end of season 4, but you and I, as producers, we are going to have to organize like some live events in which we do actual quizzes live with 5 contestants at a table, perhaps at a bar or some kind of live venue where we can have a small audience, perhaps here in Chicago, perhaps down by you. We'll see. But I think the quiz episode is a new, you know how we kind of have like our different styles of episodes? I don't even know what to call them, categories of episodes. I think it is a new category for AZP.
I like the categories. Yeah, deep dives, top 10s, quizzes.
That kind of came out by accident when Kate and I were originally designing the show. We knew, like, our first episode was top 3 favorite Zelda games because we just needed a thing to talk about. It didn't need to be particularly complicated. We were even kind of warming up to the idea of how the show would even work. I go back and I listen to that first episode sometimes, and I'm kind of like, ooh, boy, we were meandering, and it's an interesting episode to listen to. But anyway, the second episode, we were both Kate and I said, well, let's do something where we talk about all the forest dungeons. And then we realized, sometimes we have the opportunity to talk about everything that's a certain category in a game. And then I remember she and I had a little meeting after recording that third episode, and we thought, maybe we should do top 10 episodes. And at the time, I don't think I've ever told you this, at the time, we kind of thought like, really? Are we going to do top 10s? Maybe that's a little cheap. That's easy to do a top 10. I don't know if it's really like our style. But then we realized, no. It's a great format to enable further conversation about things that maybe wouldn't naturally come up. So our top 10s actually are really just excuses to talk about really weird niche parts of the Zelda universe. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that actually invites a lot of fans to respond.
I agree. On social, we get a lot of feedback about people saying, oh, well, you talked about these 10, but actually I also like blah, 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 or blee, 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 and as an 11th or a 12th, an honorable mention. That is true. And then in season 2, we kind of created a 6th category, and it was these Hey Listen episodes. And I think Kate and I did the first one. Dan joined me for the second one. And here we are. We are going to do Volume 3, Hey Listen Volume 3, to catch up with some of our listener feedback. Because it is not a secret that this has been a crazy year. It's been a crazy production season. Season 3 has forced us to get tremendously creative with how we make this show. And I think, it's been stressful, but we've also discovered a lot of, I think, really special new things about another Zelda podcast that I wouldn't have guessed could exist in the show if we wouldn't have been put through kind of these trials and tribulations. Number one, giving Kate a little bit of time to take care of some things in her life, but then also this insane situation with the pandemic where we can't be traveling or seeing each other in person really forced us to get creative. And I mean, would we have ever come up with a quiz episode had that not happened? Has the pandemic not happened? One thing I'm very, very grateful for is having people like you and Shane and the Coons and Alyssa, and even Dan was able to contribute. Having all of you on this season to kind of sub in for Kate in a way has actually gone full circle. And as I've said many times, I just consider you guys part of the family now. And I think going forward in season 4, I think we've just discovered something newer and bigger and even more I don't know. I was almost going to say all inclusive, but that's not even what I'm trying to say. Just this family grew is really what happened.
Yeah, and I think Zelda itself helps to bring in such positive, kind people, and everyone in our little sphere, our little family is so kind, so sweet. We care for one another. I make sure to send little hellos here and there, check on people if something's going on in their lives.
Yeah. I have one of your cards that you mailed to me. I don't even know if it's in the shot for the Patreon people. It's hanging up right behind me right now. And I get holiday cards from you. It's just a wonderful treat. It's really been special. And the weirdest thing is that, like, for example, Mallory and Ryan, none of us have even met them in person yet because of COVID. I've at least been able to hang out with you a little bit, and I've been able to hang out with Shane a little bit, but everybody else, Andy, we've never met Andy in person. Anyways, I look forward to season 4, in which we can all start hanging out together. And we are, if it comes together, I am trying to plan a little camping trip for all of us at the end of this summer. Hopefully we'll be post-COVID by then, and we can maybe do some group episodes or something. But I digress. Tonight, we are doing Hey Listen Volume 3. Now, Celeste, we have a bunch of different listener feedback, things that go all the way back to October up through, like, yesterday. I think most of our listeners know how these Hey Listen episodes work. We love to do our listener feedback on Another Zelda podcast. Kate and I made the choice very early on to do something that's a little unconventional, and we choose to do our listener feedback at the beginning of our episodes, not at the end. A lot of times podcasts will, do a little bit of listener feedback at the end. We are so grateful for our listeners, and we really see this podcast as a bit of a relationship with our listeners, that Kate and I said, you know what? I think we front load our episodes with a little bit of listener feedback, and then that allows us to really settle in and dive in and then really soak in 40 minutes, 50 minutes of a conversation topic. However, over the seasons, we get so much feedback now, and we're so grateful for that feedback and I spoke to this a little bit at the end of season 2. I started saying, oh my gosh, it's taking 30 minutes just to get through the listener feedback, as grateful as we are. And that's when I realized, okay, maybe we'll always just do 5 to 6 listener feedbacks in episodes and an episode. And as they build up, we'll do a listener feedback episode where the whole episode is just speaking to and with some of the comments that we've received. And so, last but not least, I'm setting a lot of groundwork here for this episode. I think our listeners, Mallory said it once, I think perhaps on a Boss Rush podcast episode, she said she was speaking about another Zelda podcast, and it might have been Turn by Turn, I think. She was like being interviewed on one of the Boss Rush podcasts, and she said something 1v1?
Like
1v1. There it is. Yeah. Did I just say Turn by Turn?
That's okay.
Well, no, that's really interesting because literally as of yesterday, as of this recording, a gentleman named Daniel sent back his contract to us here at 6.5 Media, and he is creating a strategy-based, essentially a JRPG podcast called Turn by Turn, and it's going to be coming out in about 4 months. They've already started production. We signed them for an 18-episode season 1 deal. Hopefully we can renew. Daniel's been a pleasure to work with so far. He was a listener of another Zelda podcast. He contacted me and said, I kind of would really like to do a show. And we are picking up 3 more shows this season, this year. I have a lady who owns a theater in Milwaukee who's doing a Broadway podcast that's going to be coming out in a couple months. And so Daniel, I guess this is a pre-plug for Turn by Turn that'll be coming out in a couple months. A JRPG strategy based. Oh my gosh, I'm just getting so tongue-tied because I'm getting so excited. Strategy game based podcast. I don't know. Let's go with it. Anyways, Turn by Turn. So I think on 1v1, Mallory said something like, "Oh well, the host of another Zelda podcast, David, is very passionate about meeting each other in person and having the conversations for another Zelda podcast be not essentially over the internet like we are doing right now." And I hung on as long as I could here in season 3. We found every creative which way to record. And I got to a certain point where I was thinking about it, and I was like, well, I don't know. The Coons have already recorded 3 episodes for us. They've done such a wonderful job all 3 times. But you can only go to that well so many times. I'm going to start stressing them out if I just keep asking them for more and more episodes. And you and I were talking about season 4 plans in one of our producer meetings, and it clicked for me. And I thought, boy, oh boy, we haven't heard Celeste in a long time. I guess conversationally speaking, you hadn't been on since season 2. I thought I really want to get her on the show. And since you're you're doing a lot of internet things these days with over the internet style podcast recordings, that I thought Celeste is the one that we could maybe try this with. So only, I don't know, what was it, about a week ago, you and I said, well, let's bite the bullet. Let's do an episode. We'll do it over the internet like this. And I thought, well, if there's going to be a topic that could have a slightly broken conversation, because one of the things I treasure so much is being able to sit at a desk with someone, sit at a table with someone, you're able to interrupt each other or get ideas or read each other's facial expressions. And that kind of chemistry is very important to me in a show like this. But in a Hey Listen episode, in which we basically take turns, I read one, you read one, we comment, I read one, you read one, we comment, I thought, well, that might be okay to record over the internet. So, Celeste, how do you feel about what we're going to do tonight?
I do Skype podcast recordings at least once a week with Boss Rush Games, with the 1v1 series where I interview people from all over. Yep. So this is fine. This is home.
You're in your comfort space right now.
Yes, sir.
I am less so, which is probably why I'm rambling a little bit. But nevertheless, it's a little weird. I'm looking at a digitized face and all of that. All right, Celeste, let's get to it here. I think what we have listener feedback from Instagram, from Twitter, from I guess iTunes, but it's Apple Podcasts, YouTube. We have some Discord in here. I have it sorted in, I guess you could say, a chronological descending order. In other words, the oldest is first, and we're going to descend through time to current. It's a weird way to say it. And I think we just go back and forth. That's how Kate and I did it. That's how Dan and I did it. You care to get started? Wait, do you want to do the first one? Because I've been talking a lot.
Oh, okay. Is it November 2nd, 2020?
I think it's CMD, the 10th, I'm so 2020 10. 10/18.
There's actually a September 18th. Yes.
Is there an October 18th?
I have a September 18th, actually.
So the September 18th, boy, we're just nailing it right. We're hitting it right out of the park here off the top. December 18th, I think we did read that one in a previous episode, so I ended up deleting it just as we were getting set up here, and perhaps our Google Drive folders haven't synced yet.
Okay.
Through the magic of the internet.
I will refresh that.
Well, how about this? I'll go for our October 18th, and then the next one's November 2nd, so you can queue up. But back in October 18th, and full disclosure to our listeners, there might have been one or two listener feedbacks that have slipped in here from other episodes that didn't get deleted or filtered correctly. But, if we do reread it, that's cool. And Celeste, at least our listeners will get some new insight because you'll be listening as well. So here we have, CMD is one of our, CMD, she got in touch with us on Instagram and said, "Hey there, me again, just listening to episode 10 from this season and wanted to say that I sympathize with Alyssa. My GameCube was also lost in a basement flood at my mom's house. So upsetting. I've had to rebuild my collection over time." Celeste, have you ever had a video game system get damaged?
I have not had a video game system get damaged, but when I was in 7th grade, the water system in the back of one of the toilets came undone while my sisters and I were at school. Our parents were at work, and I lost all of my Nintendo Power magazines.
That's almost worse. That's almost more heartbreaking. Essentially, a room flooded, so to speak. Is that what happened?
The whole house.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I have not had a system get truly damaged or destroyed. I do have one of the Super Nintendos that discolored over time because it was one of those early releases. But other than that, I think I've been pretty lucky. And all my systems, nothing's really had a rough demise or anything like that. Thank you, CMD. Why don't we move on to the next one here, Celeste?
All right, November 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
All right. This
Looks like
is
it's a
from,
YouTube.
Yeah, it's a YouTube comment on our Spooky Spots, another Zelda podcast, Season 3, Episode 11. This is Roman Coates. Hi, love the podcast. I listen to it whenever I have free time. Found it when I was looking for a podcast about the game series I love. I am currently playing through Ocarina and A Link Between Worlds, but my favorite has been Breath of the Wild. I looked and have spent 300 hours plus on it. Keep up the good work.
Wow. I am personally I started playing Breath of the Wild on a Wii U for the most of the first 2 seasons of this show. I did not have a Switch, and I was happily playing Breath of the Wild on my Wii U. And I think I got close to 200 hours. I don't know if I exceeded 200 because the reason I know that is that in the DLC, there's that little green line that records everywhere you go. I'm not sure if you're familiar.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And I think it has a 200-hour cache. So once you exceed 200 hours, it has to start deleting some of your original data. Mm-hmm. And I have not maxed that out. And I love playing Zelda games, but the truth is I only really have time in my life to play them maybe an hour or two a week, honestly, is really when I sit down and I kind of dig in real quick. I love to really get in deep on a Zelda game, but even Age of Calamity, at best, like every maybe 5 or 6 days, I can get in there and play like one level, and then I have to kind of keep moving on with things because we're either making podcasts or getting home from work or making dinner or whatever. But 300 hours plus, that's insane. Celeste, you might be able to relate to that because I recently saw on Switch, because we're friends on Switch Online, that I think you are like 400 plus hours on Animal Crossing right now.
Maybe. And well, you know what's funny? That's the one constant game in my life. I do about 15 to 30 minutes a day if I can. Sometimes I skip a few days, but I'm like you, where I'm very lucky if I have time to play games even a little bit nowadays.
Right. I love playing video games so much. I really do. But you get about a half an hour a night at best. And sometimes sometimes it's not a Zelda game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Fair enough. Now, so let's see here. Roman Coates is playing A Link Between Worlds and Ocarina. I wonder if it's Ocarina on the 3DS because A Link Between Worlds is a 3DS game. I'm 4 dungeons into A Link Between Worlds right now. My girlfriend and I take road trips to a little bit of land that we purchased in Kentucky, and it's about a 7-hour drive. And I've been using that time to play about a dungeon. Maybe for an hour you can at least get a play session in, maybe 2 hours of play session in, where you can walk around the overworld a little bit and get to a dungeon and get through it. So I'm about 4 dungeons in, and I'm really enjoying A Link Between Worlds. I have a newfound respect for A Link to the Past due to our season 2 finale. I didn't really care for that game before that, but when Kate and I played it and got to really kind of sink our teeth in, so to speak, I ended up really finding its charm. And so playing A Link Between Worlds is a cool little sequel to it, kind of a return to that universe. And I personally do play with the 3D cranked to the max. I kind of like the 3D view on that game,
Really?
I gotta be honest. Yeah.
It doesn't make you dizzy or anything?
Well, what's interesting is when I play Ocarina 3D on my 3DS, sometimes I do get a little dizzy. You're swinging that camera around and you get a little like, ooh, every once in a while you might even get a little like nauseous. You're like, ooh, hold on a second. But A Link Between Worlds, maybe a little bit like the Luigi Mansion games, the view is so static that it's a bit like looking at a diorama a little bit. And so you can really process that 3D a little bit better. And I will say there are certain dungeon layouts that clearly were designed with the 3D in mind. There's some tremendously vertical, so kind of at the camera experiences where I think it's technically playable if you play in 2D. If A Link Between Worlds were ever to be ported to something like the Switch or something else, it would be playable. But with the 3D, it's actually a feature. It's a true feature, not a gimmick for that game, I would say. Have you played A Link Between Worlds at all?
Yeah. I got it the year it came out. I think it was 2013. I received it for Christmas that year, and I love it. It's so creative.
That's great. So, and you've played A Link to the Past, I'm guessing.
Yes, that was my first Zelda game, actually.
Wow, you beat me then. I didn't come into the Zelda series until Link's Awakening, just after A Link to the Past.
That's okay. Better late than never.
Indeed. All right, let's move on here. Let's see. The next one we have is I think this is Twitter, and Technic says, at Another Zelda podcast, I love the podcast. I started listening last week at work, and time flies now. For a while now, I've been wanting to make a YouTube channel telling the stories of each game, theories, and timeline interactions. And your show has inspired me to do so once I finish my engineering classes this semester. Once again, thanks for the quality content and best wishes to Kate and her family. So this is a slightly older message from November. And Technic, thank you so much for the sentiments towards Kate and her family. And yes, you should make your own YouTube page and share in the Zelda love, no doubt.
David, I have a secret for you.
Is Technic someone we know?
Technic is Andy.
What?
That's Discord.
Oh my goodness, I'm reading off of Discord?
Yeah, that's he is in our Discord.
My goodness. So this is Zeldum.
That's right.
Oh my gosh, my mind is blown right now. So Technic is Andy, one of our blog writers. We've since actually absorbed him into our show as a blog writer. He even participated in the Spooky Spots episode, and he has his own Zelda page, or YouTube channel, which is quite successful, called Zeldum, and that's wonderful. Everyone should go check that out. Technic. Thanks, Andy. Oh my goodness. Discord, I think the Discord community is wonderful and exciting. It's tremendously difficult for me to stay current on there. I know, Celeste, you're a little bit more active on there, which I am quite grateful for.
It's no problem. We have some really great people in there, and I'm very appreciative.
All right, let's go over to YouTube here with Justin.
All right. Is that November 21st?
Yep, looks
Justin
like it.
V. All right. I'll take it. Favorite opening areas, Another Zelda Podcast, Season 2, Episode 1.
Ooh.
Justin V. I know this is a bit late, but in regards to the sword and shield in Ocarina of Time, it is explained that Kokiri have to get them before they go on their coming-of-age visit to the Deku Tree.
Oh, I'm sure that in this episode we were speaking about the opening areas and, of course, the Kokiri village and getting the sword and the shield in that area. And I think, Justin, I'm sure Kate and I, you know what, this one's an old one, I'm so sorry. I'm sure Kate and I were a little confused about some of the motivations for the sword and the shield, and Justin here is reminding us. Fair enough.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll move on to over in Messenger, Patrick Bazin on our Facebook page said, I have only recently started to listen to the podcast, and I love it. I was wondering if you could talk more about some of the secrets of Twilight Princess, like the grass stone flower circles Wolf Link can dig into, or the Cave of Ordeals, the Poe Quest, the Secret Village, and the updated items for Twilight Princess HD. Thanks. Celeste, have you played Twilight Princess HD yet?
I'm actually playing it right now. Ooh. I don't know if I told you this, David, but my boyfriend Timmy found a copy of it with the Wolf Link Amiibo for $9. I just looked at it. We kept the price on because it's legendary.
Amazing.
Instead of $50 at a local Walmart. So I kept the box with Wolf Link, the Amiibo, and I've been playing the HD on my Wii U, but I did play it on GameCube back in like 2006, 2007. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So, you hang on to that Wolf Link. That's a lot of fun in Breath of the Wild. That's one of the best Amiibos for Breath of the Wild because you get to spawn Wolf Link and he runs around with you. I don't know if you've tried it yet or anything.
Not yet. I need to.
The next time you're poking around in Breath of the Wild, just bring him in. He'll stick around and run around with you for the day. And a quick little tip with Wolf Link is he attacks bad guys for you that are in his vicinity. He has a little bit of artificial intelligence. And if he takes damage, he has 3 hearts, depending. He has 3 hearts, and if he takes a little bit of damage, you can feed him raw meat to heal him back up if you're ever running around with Wolf Link in Breath of the Wild.
Thank you for that.
It's a lot of fun.
Do that.
Honestly, what I did, because I'm lucky enough to have the Wolf Link Amiibo as well, though I just bought it separately at some random Best Buy a long time ago. When I started playing Breath of the Wild in Master Mode, in the beginning, you're so underpowered and everything's so difficult that I will confess I would have a good time running around with Link, who, basically it's almost like one hit kill at the beginning of Master Quest or Master Mode. And I would, at least to try to help a little bit, I'd spawn Wolf Link and let him run around with me and help me survive the crazy, crazy wilds. That was good times. So I don't know. I don't know about these grass stone flower circles that Wolf Link can dig into. I need to learn.
Oh, is it not the ones where you howl and he summons the golden wolf who then is the ancient?
I don't think so. I think this might just be like this is probably similar to like what a Korok is in Breath of the Wild, where maybe there's just circles of stones, or a bit like the circle of stones that were in Ocarina, where if you see stones in a circle, bomb the middle because I'm sure there's a hole that's going to go to the ground. I'd be willing to bet that the grass stone flowers is something like that.
I think so. They do have something, and you probably know what I'm talking about. It was that you can get these little stamps that you could use in the Wii U Miiverse thing they used to have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I can't speak. When he says secret village, I'm thinking of the secret village that isn't very secret, where you go meet all the cats and you do the little like Wild West showdown with the goblins with your little crossbow. Or your arrows, your regular arrows. In Twilight Princess, there's kind of like a hidden city, not city, but little village along one of the little hallways that connects you from one part of Hyrule Field to another part. But I think that's not so secret because I think you have to do that quest to advance. So I don't know if that one counts or not. But that's what I'm thinking of when he speaks to that.
That's what I'm thinking of too. Impaz, I think her name is. Over there.
Oh, Impaz. Yeah. Well, why don't we go on over to Illy Laszlo over on Twitter.
All right. This is Illy Laszlo, another Zelda pod. Hey, so I just found you guys. You are so awesome. I'm in the Army. Thank you for your service. So I like to listen to you when I am on kitchen duty or when I am driving. Okay. Keep up the hard work. Cheers from Israel.
Awesome. Wow, super cool. Illy Laszlo, at Illy Laszlo, sent us that message. That was back in the beginning of December, so we're getting a little bit closer to our current times. Thank you so much. We get this often, Celeste. People will kind of let us know where they're listening to the show or when and how they're listening to the show. We do run analytics, so we get a general sense of what countries the episodes are being listened to, but it's always nice when you can kind of get a personal connection like this, and you can almost visualize someone listening to the show. So that is super cool. When I'm on kitchen duty or when I'm driving. Very good. I love it so much. All right, I'm going to move on here. This one looks like it's a iTunes review. Ray Gua said over on iTunes, 5-star rating, said, phenomenal. I just stumbled upon this podcast the other day, and it's phenomenal. Okay. I'm several episodes in, and there's no sign of slowing down. Keep it going, and hopefully I'll be caught up to current episodes in the near future. Thank you so much, Ray. We certainly appreciate the support. I say it every single time that a review and a rating on iTunes really, really, truly helps us be exposed to more listeners. Apple uses that as a massive indicator on their algorithm. And the next review here, Brewmaster, but it's spelled a little interestingly. For a second, I was wondering if it might have been Ryan Kuhn or Mike Newton, who are the two gentlemen that host a different 6.5 podcast called Brothers-in-Law, but I'm not so sure. Celeste, why don't you read this one if you're able?
Yes, sir. Brewmaster. Amazing podcast. Found this podcast about a month ago, and I've been hooked ever since. The chemistry between Kate and Dave are great. Two fans that just love Zelda as much as I do. I'm 29, and I remember my first experience with Zelda like it was yesterday. It was Christmas of '98, and I just opened my big present that year, and it was an N64, and I got Ocarina of Time. I remember staying up all night with my dad as we explored the Deku Tree, and from that moment, I was hooked. I've played almost every game, but my favorite is hands down Majora's Mask, and I'm enjoying the love-hate relationship that you guys seem to have with that game, and I can't wait for that review episode. I work as a head brewer in a brewery in Pennsylvania and listen to your podcast daily, and it really brightens my day. I'm starting season 3 today and can't wait to hear what's in store going forward. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for the support. Certainly, season 3 was a present in itself to us. The things that we were able to learn and discover, and all the extra voices we were able to bring into the show was a real treat. And I appreciate your sentiments about the chemistry between Kate and I. Certainly, that was a tone-setting situation, one in which that we almost kind of continue to emulate through season 3. And I look forward to a day where Kate returns to the show. And let's see what else. Ocarina of Time. That was I pre-ordered Ocarina and got it around that holiday season as well. But to get it with your Nintendo 64, boy, that must have been a pretty special moment.
Mm-hmm.
Majora's Mask, love-hate. One thing that was interesting, I think, Celeste, I am saving the Majora's Mask review to at least have Kate in there sometime in the future, because if I recall back in season 1, Kate would have the sentiment of I think she expected to not like it. She expects to not like Majora's Mask because she tried it once or twice and dove in just a little bit. And hopefully under the context of this podcast, we'd be able to. I mean, maybe we turn it into a group thing because a lot of people have a lot of things to say about Majora's Mask. I personally really enjoy Majora's Mask. Sometimes it's a little frustrating, but most of the time I think it's pretty artful. How do you feel about Majora's? And then I think I'm going to quick hit a few of these other reviews after your comments.
I really enjoy it. The amount of theories that have spilled from that one Zelda game, it's amazing. It blows my mind. Usually if you're looking up Zelda lore or Zelda theories on YouTube, Majora's Mask seems to be the subject, right? That's what I find. I love the NPCs in video games, and I lovingly refer to Majora's Mask as Side Quest the game. And I love the side quest. I love the deep connections. I love the symbolism. I love the meanings. I personally, my favorite aspect is going to the Happy Mask salesman while you're wearing a mask, not a transformation mask, but just a regular mask.
Yeah.
And he will tell you what kinds of feelings that mask is showing him.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. That's cool. Now, Majora's Mask was the first game that IG Aonuma was kind of given the full reins on. IG Aonuma had worked on Ocarina of Time, and actually IG Aonuma's involvement with the Zelda series went all the way back to the original Legend of Zelda. As you might recall from our bonus question on our quiz episode, it was Satoru Iwata, Miyamoto, and also Iwata. Those three gentlemen were kind of the main creators of the very first Zelda game. And Iwata stayed with the Zelda series throughout all of the incarnations. And then when when Nintendo had asked to kind of streamline put out another Zelda game after Ocarina of Time, and they came up with the idea of using the same assets, Miyamoto was off doing other projects, and since IG Numa was so connected to the series, they elected to have him essentially direct or be the game director of Majora's Mask. And I think that IG Numa, boy, that game is like, yes, he's continued to be involved. Actually, he's been the main director for all the Zelda games since, except for some of the Capcom, the ones that have been done by slightly other production companies. But boy, talk about like an artist being given an opportunity and just going for it. I think he did that with Majora's Mask. He did not hold back with what they were trying to accomplish with Majora's Mask. In fact, we all know that Majora's Mask did have to get scaled back a little bit in the end. They originally were going to try to do 7 days, not 3. Can you imagine programming 7 days worth of every single NPC? They had a lot of plans, but nevertheless, I think the artistry in the storytelling still that introduced a density of gameplay that hadn't happened much before. Certainly not in the Zelda series, and I think it really started to set the tone.
I think so. I love it.
All right, we've got a bunch of iTunes ones here. I'm just going to go right down the list here. I'm going to do like 3 or 4 of them. Batriox leaves a review. Batro?
Yeah, you know the guy in Skyward Sword who wants to be human?
That's right. Wonderful.
Thanks for listening from Skyloft.
The review here is Girahim. I love this podcast. I'm listening to the antagonist episode right now. I think my favorite is Girahim because he is dynamic throughout the game and reminds me in more ways than one of Frisia from the Dragon Ball universe. Also, Girahim's dynamism throughout the game is impressive. I just finished Skyward Sword and would defend it vehemently. Tongue out emoticon. I love this pod through each of its seasons and can't wait for the darkness to be sealed so we can do in-person meetups because I'm a fellow Chicagoan. Thanks for all you do. Oh my gosh, I cannot wait either. We have to be getting together with these Chicago meetups. That's so funny. We were already talking about that at the beginning of this episode. We were going to do it in season 3 a little bit, but of course, the darkness, as Beatrice says here, is still sealed. We're waiting, getting closer and closer. Hopefully the nation and the world are being increasingly responsible with this pandemic, and we'll be able to get through it soon enough, at which point, yes, fellow Chicagoan, we will be getting together. I'm going to do another one here. Amazing podcast for Zelda fans. The submission is Lover of the Arts. Hear ya. I love that. I love the names of these reviewers. Love this podcast. The content posted is enjoyable and high quality. I enjoy the in-depth conversations. It's as if I'm there. And who doesn't love a top 10 list? Oh my gosh, too funny. Of course, honestly, I think the top 10 lists certainly do deliver, Celeste, certainly. If you off the top of your head right now, if you could do a top 10 list, what's something what kind of a top 10 list episode would you like to be a part of?
Oh my goodness, I feel like I have one in there. I would like to do a top 10 of the different spirits / ghost in the Zelda series.
Oh, that's cool.
Halloween, October, fodder.
Maybe that's October season 4. I think so. Let's see, moving on here. Zelda 4 Life 08 says, Breath of the Wild 2 and Hyrule Warriors. 5-star review. I love this pod and just want to see an episode about expectations for the prequel and sequel of Breath of the Wild. So this came out just before Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity came out. I'd be happy to talk about Age of Calamity a little bit. I think that might have to be a little bit of a bonus episode or something like that, Celeste. You have not started playing it yet, as you were saying in our pre-show. I am roughly halfway through Age of Calamity, and I have thoughts. I'm a touch underwhelmed by the game, but it's really nice to kind of be back in that universe. And as far as the sequel goes, I couldn't be more excited. I'm tremendously excited about what the little drips and drops we get about what Breath of the Wild 2, whatever it ends up being titled, could be. I'm very excited. My favorite tidbit of information about Breath of the Wild 2, Celeste, is that when IG Enuma, and I've said this on the show before, when IG Enuma was asked about the original Breath of the Wild, he made the comment that his team was playing a lot of Skyrim when they were designing Breath of the Wild. And he said with Breath of the Wild 2, and maybe it's a little bit of a hint, he said with Breath of the Wild 2, a lot of the team was playing Red Dead Redemption 2. And they were getting very excited. So in some ways, I think Skyrim, the experience in Skyrim might have informed or inspired some choices in Breath of the Wild, certainly some of this open world stuff. And I hope that Red Dead Redemption 2 in some ways inspires a little bit of this nomadic traveling situation. They kind of do the random live events already in Breath of the Wild, but they're very, very minimal. You know, a certain animal runs by or a certain Yiga clan member pops up or something like that. But let's see, I think some of that kind of epic storytelling and quest nature that can sometimes happen in Red Dead Redemption 2. Hopefully that isn't. I would love to have some of those things leak into the Breath of the Wild sequel. How do you feel about the Breath of the Wild sequel?
Oh my gosh, I love watching Red Dead Redemption 2. I love watching Timmy play it. The side quests, the storytelling, the voice acting, the atmosphere. It's incredible.
Well, so if any of that comes over to Breath of the Wild 2, I think that'd be wonderful. Let's see, moving on along here. Zekalak124 says, "Great pod. I love this podcast. It's fun to get so much perspective on how other people have played the games I love so much. You all are amazing, and keep going." Certainly. I think this was at a time as we are going through season 3, which has been difficult to produce the show, certainly, but we are so happy and pleased that our listeners have kind of stayed the course with us and listened to every single episode and continue to support us, and we continue to try to support them by coming up with ways to make these episodes. So thank you so much. Another one here, the Desert Potato Chip. The Dessert Potato Chip? Did I read that wrong?
Desert.
Desert, yeah. I come here for only one thing is the title of the review over on Apple Podcasts. New fan here. I've been listening to a mix of old and new episodes as they come out, and I am in love, all caps. Well, thank you so much, the Desert Potato Chip. But I gotta be honest, there's only one thing I look forward to, and that's Dave's impressions of enemy sound effects. It's been a while. I don't remember this one. I just listened to Top 10 Most Bothersome Baddies. That's the one I did with Alyssa in the beginning of the season, and almost spit out my water when David did the Yiga clan sound effect. Ha 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 ha. Oh, I must have really nailed it. I don't even remember. Laughy face, laughy face, laughy face. Just kidding. I love everything about this podcast and feel like I have someone to talk with about my love for Zelda. Green heart emoji. I use the green heart emoji in a lot of our social stuff, and for me, that's code for Zelda love. This is great. I do make sound effects from time to time, and sometimes I do it without even realizing. But Celeste, I have one more podcast review here. Why don't you read this one, and then we're going to dig back into some of our social.
All right. This is from Mr. C. Pickle. Love this podcast. I have been listening to this podcast for the last week, and I absolutely loved what I have listened to. I really enjoyed the Zelda quiz episode you did recently, and definitely think you should do another one later. Also, assuming you have played some Age of Calamity, what do you think of the story you have seen so far? Do you have any favorite characters you like to play as? Thanks as always. I look forward to more episodes.
So without getting too deep into Age of Calamity, I'd like to flip this a little bit, Celeste, and ask you, I think you've at least somewhat become aware that there are many different kinds of characters that you may or may not play as in Age of Calamity. It is essentially a Hyrule Warriors game after all, and kind of the fan delivery service of being able to play as different characters is certainly there. If you had to pick one from Breath of the Wild that you would think that you would most look forward to being able to play, not that you suspect is in the game or not, what's a character that you would enjoy being surprised with to be able to play as?
Oh, okay. Being surprised with. Oh,
I mean,
man.
or look forward to most, I suppose. But I mean, is your answer basically Link?
Urbosa.
Urbosa. Okay, right.
Yes, I love her. She's so sassy, and she's so strong and so powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's certainly a cool character. I was playing Age of Calamity, and we know that Urbosa's in the game from the trailers, so I don't mind talking about it. And the level that Urbosa was introduced was the first level that my girlfriend saw me playing the game, and she was basically not knowing anything about Breath of the Wild, was very intrigued. She was like, "Oh, that's not Link, but who is this cool person you're playing as?" And I was like, "Actually, this is Urbosa. She's awesome." Blah 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 blah. If you could be surprised by a character, one that you have not seen in any of the trailers, what would be a? So for the people who have played the game, this might be fun to hear. But what would be a character that you'd enjoy being surprised by?
That lady who's really protective of her flowers at that shrine. She seems like she could take down some people.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's the best pick ever. I love it. And like maybe her special attacks is flowers would grow and then the bad guys would step on them and she would just freak out. I love it. So I think we're going to go to break, but there's one more here about the Zelda quiz. Our very next, actually, it is one more listener feedback from Apple Podcasts here. And I'm going to read it real quick because it refers to the Zelda quiz, and then I think we'll go to break for a bit. Okay, Celeste?
All right.
And it's titled Love, 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 AZP, the best Zelda podcast ever. This is definitely ego boosting, these Hey Listen episodes, isn't it? I have to confess. It is wonderful to get this energy from our listeners and this fuel for us to continue making the show as much as we love doing it, and we would probably be doing it if absolutely no one listened at all. It is really tremendously rewarding to feel this kind of extended family by way of our listeners grow and grow and grow and give us feedback and encouragement and love back, isn't it, Celeste?
I love it. They're so sweet, and it's fun. It's fun to connect over something we all love like this.
It's true. So I continue. I'm currently listening to the Zelda quiz episode from season 3 and just wanted to thank you all for such an amazing podcast about my absolute favorite video game series. I've been a Zelda fan since the beginning when The Legend of Zelda was released when I was 5. Oh, this person might be around my age. I bought a Nintendo Switch at the beginning of this year, so David, don't feel bad about waiting to get one yourself. And I went down a huge Breath of the Wild rabbit hole and was looking for podcasts that might have insight on the game and found this amazing podcast in the process. David and Kate are top-notch hosts and have the perfect dynamic in hosting the show. I was saddened to hear about Kate's departure, but I'm sending love and care out to her and her family during this hard time. David, thank you for carrying the torch and bringing on so many great guests to the show. In the meantime, everyone has been so friendly, informative, and funny, especially Dan, and has made listening to the show an absolute delight during my work days in the office. Thank you, David, Kate. Yeah. I mean, we were speaking to this a little bit earlier. I actually thought this was going to be a little bit more about the Zelda quiz episode, but it ended up just being general love and support, and that's wonderful. Thank you so much, A.H. Gibson. Gibson, that looks familiar. I feel like we have a Gibson on our Patreon page these days. But anyway, Celeste, it has been a journey. It has been nice getting our support, and it's nice to literally hear it too from our listeners. Their acknowledgement of season 3 and everything else. So one thing, Celeste, before we go to break, I reached out, speaking of our Patreon listeners, I reached out on Patreon and to all of our tiers. We have 3 different tiers, sword, white sword, and magical sword, and they all have different levels of rewards and things that we offer. But I reached out to every single person who was on Patreon. I said, hey, Celeste and I are going to do a Hey Listen episode, and we've never done this before, but I think I'd kind of like to ask all of you to participate in essentially an AMA. And we got some feedback. We got some of our Patreon listeners to ask us anything at all. Some of these questions I've seen, some of them I haven't. We're definitely going to dive into the AMA when we get back from our break here. We have a little bit more social listener feedback to go through, and then we're going to listen to what our Patreon patrons had to ask of us. Many of them are Zelda related, if not all, but I haven't read all of them yet because honestly, even within the last day, which I haven't checked, we've gotten a few more. So Celeste, I guess I'll see you after, I don't know, probably a Brothers-in-Law ad and probably a Studio Demands It ad. And I'll see you in a bit. Sound good?
All right. Good.
Hey, this is TC.
And this is Jim from the Studio Demands It podcast,
Where every episode we take a demand from a hypothetical studio,
which could be you,
and challenge ourselves to conceptualize, pitch, and craft a film based on the stipulations
or the demands
we are given. We talk about movies all the time. Particularly, we complain about the choices made in the films we've seen.
We're nerds like that.
And, of course, like any good nerd does, we automatically assume that we could do better.
Even with the demands and restrictions that clearly must have been put on by a production.
So head on over to studiodemandsit.com and listen to our previous library of previous episodes. Our precious library, Jim. Our library of precious episodes.
You're a pirate, Smeagol.
Okay. So head on over to studiodemandsit.com to listen to our library of episodes.
And submit your demand for a future episode, too.
So go do that.
Okay, bye.
Okay, end of ad.
Hi, I'm Ryan.
And I'm Mike.
And we are brothers-in-law. We both love beer and are amateur home brewers.
Wait, so does that make us brothers-in-law?
I believe so.
Every episode, we will talk about aspects of beer and home brewing.
But nothing super technical because we're learning this too.
So join us as we sit down together and dive into something beer-related.
Whether it's a little field research, tasting a certain beer style, or beers from a specific brewery.
Talk about our experiences brewing beer at home, including our own solo brews, as well as themed competitions we'll set up along the way.
We will also talk about some of our favorite aspects of brewing, like hops, extra ingredients, building our brew cave, and more. And of course, our own misadventures that have happened along the way.
So, if you like beer, are home brewing already,
or if you have an interest in home brewing and don't know where to start,
join us on Brothers-in-Law Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
And make sure to follow us on Twitter at Brothers-in-Law and check out our website, brothersinlaw.com.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, we are back. Celeste, let's waste no time at all because we have plenty of more listener feedback to get through. So we had a moment back in early December where I think we were coming up on our 200th review, and it was kind of fun to put a little tweet out saying oh my gosh, I wonder who it'll be. And there was a day where we had a bunch of people submit, and I think he might have missed it by one, but our own Shane Kelly got in there and threw a review up on iTunes, which was awesome. But it's almost more of a sweet little message here. And why don't you read it?
Oh, Shane says, on my 2-year anniversary, hello, friends. I may or may not be biased on this review, but another Zelda podcast has brought me much joy despite the year we have been having. When I listened to my first episode, I knew it was special, and 2 years ago I was asked to step on board and write blogs with the many talented people we have and the newer writers we have today. After a few episodes under my belt, I have become a bit braver and a bit more confident in myself and know these improvements will help us build an even better Zelda experience. Thank you, David, Kate, Celeste, Ryan, Mallory, Andy, Lizzie, Dan, Carlos, Stephanie, Alyssa, and any others I may have overlooked or forgotten. Thanks for being such great people in this industry. I'm glad I can take this Zelda journey with all of you. I heart peace you all. Long live Hyrule. Shane Kelly.
Yes, Shane is an absolute pleasure to have as part of our team. He was able to join me for an episode way back in season 2. He was kind of one of our first blog writer guests, really. I had Lizzie on for like a top 10 episode, top 10 Shrine episode, but Shane meeting with him was very special to me because he and it was the first time that we met each other in person. I was driving up from Chicago and he was driving down from mid to northern Wisconsin where he lives, and we met up in Milwaukee. I remember I rented there was this office building, you can rent meeting rooms at this building in Milwaukee that I used to rent for holding meetings when I was doing freelance design and stuff. I rented one of those rooms. He and I set up some mics in there and we recorded our favorite ways to regain hearts episode in season 2. And that was also a really special day because after the recording, Shane continued to hang out with me, and we went over to a production studio that was just down the street where we started to construct the mock-up for what would be our booth at the Midwest Gaming Classic Convention. And so he was there and was a part of that and helped me and John kind of preset all the things that we ended up bringing to the show. And that was really cool. I can't wait to record with Shane again. He actually was our most recent live. He was the most recent road trip episode where my girlfriend Gingsy and I drove up to, I think it's Manitowoc or Monaco. I think it's Manitowoc where he lives. And we met at his house and recorded the 3rd episode of this season. which was maybe it was top 10 non-canonical appearances by Link. It was an absolute pleasure. And then just a day or two after recording that episode is when at least the city of Chicago was put on lockdown, and we had to start making some other choices. But I can't wait to hang out with Shane again. Shane, thank you so much for your kind words, and really honestly, thank you for your support of the show and being a part of our family with all the blogs that he writes, which are wonderful. I mean, really, it's Celeste, it's you and he are kind of my OG blog writers at this point.
And Carlos, actually.
Of course,
Yes.
Carlos.
Yes.
I mean, it was even you and Shane quite just a few times before Carlos. I remember having meetings with you where it was like, "Hey, we got this new guy. His name's Carlos," and you're like, "No problem, Dave."
Yeah. We haven't heard from him in a while. He's very busy with work, but we definitely appreciate all he's done for us.
Indeed. Another person I've never met in person yet. But anyway, I'll move on over on YouTube here. Brodani27 left us a comment after one of our videos, and Brodani27 said, "I'm on your newest video because I wanted you guys to see this because I just started listening to you guys and I love listening to you guys every day, but I'm just a kid." Oh, Brodani27, thank you so much for the support. You listen any day you want. You're always most welcome.
That is the cutest.
I love it. We have a couple other kid reviews later on in the list here, which just warms my heart. Absolutely makes me so happy. Celeste, we have one over on, I believe, Twitter here. Would you care to read that one?
Yes, is that January 2nd, I believe?
Yes, looks like it.
Okay.
I know my list and your list they're a little different, so we have to confirm by looking at the dates here. No problem at all. Why don't you go for it?
Okay, this person is at Super SP5. I am really enjoying another Zelda pod. It's been really fun to listen to my favorite series. I am still on season 1, so I don't know if you guys have talked about it, but had any of the team heard about the Zelda manga? I have almost all of them, and as a fan of Twilight Princess, it's very good, and they have included a screenshot of their collection of the manga.
Yeah, it looks like 10, maybe 14 different books here. The 4 at the bottom, I think, almost look like they're all Twilight Princess, which is interesting. Kind of cool. Mm-hmm. And if I'm just judging on the screen, on the artwork, the cover art, I think it's kind of one book per game. I'm definitely recognizing a Wind Waker one. I definitely see a Link to the Past one there. What else are you identifying, Celeste? I think I see Oracle in there.
Gosh. There's a Majora's Mask. There's my goodness, because I have this collection.
Wait, really?
Oracle games, Link to the
Celeste,
Past.
wait, you can speak to this? You have these?
Yeah, I have them all except the Twilight Princess one, because the Twilight Princess one is, as you've pointed out, more than one volume. So I haven't had a chance to gather all of them. When I was a teenager, I used to buy manga a lot, but it gets kind of expensive because they're about $10 a book.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. That sounds like a great price. I'd love to pick some of these up.
Well, for the same, I guess because if you want to collect all of them, it could get pricey very fast.
Yeah, that's fair. That's truly fair. Maybe I would start. Maybe I would do it. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here, but maybe I'd do it like out of order. I'd go. Oh, I should go with my favorite Zelda games in order, or like the order that I played them. So I played Link's Awakening first. Maybe I try to get that one. Anyways, I digress. I'm going to move on over, but we're going to go back over to Apple Podcasts real quick. And Jameson's Toy Box here left us a very nice review. 5-star review. The title of the review is Perfect, with like 6 exclamation points. So Jameson's Toy Box says, I am 10 years old and I love this podcast. My dad introduced this podcast to me and I love it. My first Zelda game was Breath of the Wild. My favorite game of all time is the Minish Cap. Oh, I just hit the mic. I got so excited about that. Is the Minish Cap. I just got Age of Calamity, and all I'll say is it's pretty awesome. Oh, I almost forgot. My first time playing The Legend of Zelda was when I was 8 years old. I think it's cool that we live in Wisconsin. Well, that's all. Thanks for making the podcast. P.S. You should do an Age of Calamity review. Thanks. Your listener, Jameson I can't say the last name. Kozarecki, something like that. And then he says, did I mention everything? I think you did, Jameson. Wonderful. Thank you so much for leaving us a great review. I'm really excited that you were able to listen to this show with your dad.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Thank you so much. I love Minish Cap.
Minish Cap is a
Very
special
much.
one. I really enjoy. Kate really liked Minish Cap too, and that was interesting because she was coming off an episode where she was a little less enthusiastic about Link's Awakening, playing it on an original Game Boy with the original cartridge. That when we went and did our Minish Cap review episode, she was really charmed by it as well. My favorite way of playing, I play Minish Cap on the Game Boy Advance SP often, but the graphics are good enough, you could say, that it totally lives up playing it on a Game Boy player on a television screen. I don't know. Do you have a preferred way of playing Minish Cap, Celeste?
I have it on my 3DS, actually, for convenience.
Oh, interesting. Like a download?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wait a second.
Yes.
Really? I've searched. I have a 3DS and I've searched the store
I
and
know
I've never found it.
Oh, I also my DS Lite. I'm sorry, because I do have the cartridge, and I have the
and
DS
then
Lite,
you can
the
play
Zelda
it
DS
Game
Lite.
Boy style on your DS Lite. Yeah.
Yes, I misspoke.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I tell you, we've got one from January 9th here. It's titled "Only Been Here for 2 Weeks." Do you have that one up, Celeste? Maybe you could read it.
I do. Only been here for 2 weeks, and this is W.E.W.7. I think this is an awesome podcast, and I love the topics that come up. But can you guys please add an episode on your favorite physics in a top 10 format on the podcast? That would be amazing. Well, I think Lizzie needs to come back for that because she's an engineer.
Perhaps, but that's a great idea. Top 10 physics, maybe favorite physics. No, I think favorite physics would be too vague. I think we'd have to do like top 10. Oh, Celeste, we're having a meeting real quick, right on air. Maybe in season 4, it's a top 10 favorite physics-based moments or something like that, where it's not a pre-canned animation, but you need to use whatever the in-game physics engine is. Obviously, there's going to be some Breath of the Wild choices in there. Wind Waker actually has some rudimentary physics, especially like in the Forest Temple. I think there's some light physics puzzles to be solved. I wonder if we could find a 2-dimensional version of a physics model. But anyway, maybe a little bit of Minish Cap has some light physics. But anyway, that could be cool. I love that idea. I'm going to move on here to Carrie, Cairii, with a little pink bow tie emoji. They say here, love it. I love and always look forward to a Zelda podcast. I came across it and love it ever since hearing other diehard Zelda fans talk about The Legend of Zelda. And hello from another fellow Hylian. Well, thank you, Carrie. Thank you so much. Thank you for your support. And my mouse just froze. So I've got the next one here is January 15th. Celeste, maybe you could cue it up.
January 15th.
Over on YouTube.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Let me open it. Okay, this is A Link to the Past, another Zelda podcast, Season 2, Episode 25, Jeremy Horn. I finally beat this game, and it's an awesome bonus reward to be able to finally listen to this episode and hear Kate again, who I miss dearly. Crying emoji face. I forgot how funny she is. Keep up the good work, David. You rule.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. I couldn't be keeping up the good work without the support of people like Celeste and Shane and the Coons and everybody else who's helped us make these shows. But we all miss Kate as well. We can't wait for her to eventually return. I think it's in the cards. I really do. But we certainly want to give her enough time and peace to find the appropriate time to re-enter the show. And at that point, I can't wait, Celeste, because I think we'd be able to just bring her right into this family. You know what I mean? When the time comes.
Yeah.
I don't know if we could
Kate.
ever return to just Kate and I couldn't do it. The family's grown too big, and it's really become something even bigger. And I think that's really, really special. So Jeremy Horn, thank you for your support over on YouTube. I'm going to move forward here. Okay,
right.
So Easy Boy 324 most recently said over on Apple Podcasts, I love this podcast. I was looking forward to a good Zelda podcast when I found this one. After a few episodes, I absolutely loved it. You guys are the best. Keep doing what you're doing. Also, I think you should do an episode on the new Hyrule Warrior game, Age of Calamity, because that will probably affect the Zelda timeline a lot. Okay, so a lot of requests for Age of Calamity. I think, we usually don't do episodes on spin-off games, but because Age of Calamity is so clearly in the Breath of the Wild timeline, Celeste, maybe we do eventually do I just got an idea. perhaps our Age of Calamity episode is a roundtable style episode with as many of the AZP crew as we can get together so we can all discuss it. Just like how the game has a bunch of characters coming together, it's not just Link. It might be a nice way to talk about that game. And it wouldn't be an official full review episode because I think it is a bit polarizing in its game mechanics and its timeline. Not too many spoilers there, but I think it could be a touch polarizing. So that could be a great conversation to be had. EasyBoy324, thank you very much. Oh, I think if you don't mind, I'm going to read this next one. Too Critical says, I don't know if you saw this one just a few days ago. Too Critical is a person who has given us a review on iTunes before, but they modified their review real quick, and I'm just going to read the update. Too Critical says, time to get critical. Thanks for reading my review. I really ran around the house for 5 minutes after. You read my review when I was fighting Max Kosha in Breath of the Wild. Then I got the Master Cycle, and I was so happy I thought I might barf. Send Kate my well wishes. Oh, Too Critical. I'm so happy you experienced so many exciting moments with that awesome final DLC battle, which can get a bit tricky. Getting the Master Cycle. And then also, allowing us to read your previous review. And then real quick, there's a PS. Now, this is interesting, Celeste. I want your thoughts on this. PS, stop saying that there are multiple Ganondorfs. There are only two. The one from Ocarina and the one in Wind Waker. The one in Ocarina is also in Twilight and Breath of the Wild 2. All in all, love the show. So we definitely know that the Ganondorf in Ocarina is the same Ganondorf in Twilight Princess, and everyone is suspecting, and it's probably true that it is the same Ganondorf in Breath of the Wild. I think it's easy to forget that there might only be two Ganondorfs. The Wind Waker Ganondorf, I think, is a separate person, a separate character. Would you agree?
Yeah, he's the one who sticks out the most to me, actually, because his character is fleshed out so well in that game.
One thing that's interesting about the Ganondorf in Wind Waker is that I think that is a new Ganondorf as well, because it's also like a new Link. But they do have the old Hyrule from Ocarina referenced down below the ocean. But I don't think it's the same Ganondorf. And if you look back at some of the older games, Ganon shows up time and time again. Ganon shows up all over the place, but I think Too Critical's onto something here. I think Ganondorf really only shows up twice.
Oh gosh, I think this cat is correct because I'm racking my brain trying to remember the games I've played. And Ganon, like you've said, oh my goodness, I think like A Link to the Past is Ganon, not Ganondorf. And
you know what? We have one Ask Me Anything question, one AMA question from our own Andy that I think also references this Ganondorf situation. So let's return to the Ganondorf conundrum when we get to our AMAs. We have, I think, 5 listener feedbacks left. If you wouldn't mind jumping to January 17th, we have a Patreon. We have 2 Patreon comments by Rebecca Jewell. Celeste, why don't you read both of them if you can pull those files up?
Oh, great. Okay. Rebecca Jewell, thank you so much for commenting on Patreon. I have never, ever watched the show before, but I am now intrigued. Crying, laughing, emoji face. Thanks for the great commentary. Really loved both of your takes on the strange, quote-unquote, woke vibes. LOL. Would love if Sweet Kate could come back even just a little in season 4. I hope she's doing well. 3 heart emoji with a little smiley face.
So this was a comment under the episode that TC DeWitt and I did. We had a guest, TC DeWitt, from the podcast Studio Demands It. He came on and we watched the first 3 episodes of the infamous Legend of Zelda TV show from the 80s, Celeste. And I know, I think you've seen the episode.
Yes. Yeah.
Or at least listened to the episode that TC and I recorded. And we did have a lot to say about kind of the weird vibes in that show, how sometimes it seemed like Zelda was almost submissive, and other times it seemed like she was completely empowered, and just kind of the awkward nature of Link's attitude. I think Rebecca's speaking to that a little bit. We have another one here by Rebecca where she says, "Great episode, you guys. Really enjoy the rankings. Even if you made me feel like a massive chicken, Silent Realm and Skyward Sword gives me nightmares. Also, Magical Sword quiz episode. I would really love to join." I think Rebecca is one of our top tier contributors. She's been with us for a long time. I suspect that she would be absolutely invited into our Patreon Magical Sword quiz. However, Celeste, this is a comment regarding our Spooky Spots episode, which you were able to be a part of. So what do you have to say about Rebecca's comments here?
Oh gosh, I thought that was such a funny episode because some of us thought some areas were kind of, they're kind of okay. I guess they're not that spooky. I remember you mentioned the path to the Yiga clan in Breath of the Wild as being pretty ominous, and not many of us thought it was.
Dude, I thought it was so spooky. I remember getting like chills up my spine as I The thing is, here's the thing about Breath of the Wild. Like, if you play the game the way you play the game, and at that time I was approaching the Yiga clan with my analog stick, not running. I was definitely walking very slowly. I was definitely playing it almost stealth style. I was definitely hugging the edges of that canyon. I was going up on the canyon, looking down, see if I was going to get ambushed at any point. I definitely was crouching around the little frog statues. So I think I absolutely intensified the creepiness through my own construction of going through that area. I think if you were to full speed run through that, it probably wouldn't be particularly effective or particularly spooky. And so I totally get it. I think I was accidentally making it spookier for myself because I was so much expecting something to happen. But what was the scariest spot for you there, Celeste? I think I remember.
Gosh, probably something like the bottom of the well or the Silent Realm, like Rebecca's talking about.
The Silent Realm is kind of like, I don't know if it's spooky for me, but it was definitely creepy and unsettling. Yes, for sure. Mm-hmm. Over on YouTube, real quick, Problem Solvent just said very quickly, listening to this season for the second time now, still love it. Love emoji, heart emoji. Very nice, Problem Solvent. Thank you so much. Going back through the episodes. Let's see here, Celeste. We're almost at the end here. I have the Umbridge comment over on YouTube, January 17th. If you can find it, why don't you read that?
All right. This is Umbridge commented on Link's Loves, Another Zelda podcast, season 1, episode 3. Hi guys, just found this podcast. I have 4.
Pardon me, real quick, Celeste. The I have 4 is in regards to the episode. This was an episode where Kate and I very early on discussed, I don't know if you would say possible romantic relationships for Link, but relationships or characters that seemed to certainly have certain emotions for Link. Even if he didn't necessarily reciprocate. Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. So this is I wanted to give it a little bit of context here. I apologize. Thank you.
Oh, no, thank you. That's very helpful. I have 4 love interests, you could say, just from Ocarina of Time. Nibiru, the promise, in quotes, if you guys remember that. Gerudo woman with the cow down by the falls. And she says, we're thinking the same thing and might as well make the best of things. One of the imprisoned carpenters says, you're cute. And last but not least, the Poe inside the castle gate room. Only the first time you talk to him. Yikes. P.S. Adult Zelda nerds rule. Oh my. Yes, there are some suggestive parts in the series.
There's something about the Gerudo, especially in Ocarina of Time. They're all kind of, you know what? This is interesting because we just got done talking about Urbosa being strong and all these. She's dynamic and has many traits to her character, but at the same time, she has a touch of, I'll say, sass to her. Like, she has a confidence and she doesn't mind having not a sense of humor about things, but she doesn't mind giving things a little bit of an edge sometimes. And I think that is a much more fleshed out and well-realized version of what maybe was also kind of being approached with the Gerudo back in Ocarina of Time. But I think that some of the characters here that Umbridge is bringing up it's true. It seems like many of the Gerudo in Ocarina of Time have a I don't know, like a flirty vibe a little bit. I don't know if they're necessarily hitting on Link. Maybe.
Well, one of the gossip stones tells you that they go into Hyrule Castletown looking for boyfriends sometimes. So. Okay,
fair enough. So next, Celeste, why don't we have you read both of these? These are some Discord comments that you were able to submit and add into our chat here, and then we'll get right into our AMA.
All right, this one's from LL_whoops. I know that there are in-game tutorials and not having manuals cuts down on cost, but I wish they would still make them, referring to how games used to include little manuals. If anybody too young doesn't know what we're talking about. I remember for some games, the manuals were the only source to know what the story and context of the game was. The artwork included also was what the developers envisioned for what characters and games would look like if they had the ability. The Ocarina of Time remake on the 3DS is pretty cool to me because they were able to make the things look like what I envisioned in their original artwork, which was included with the manual.
Yeah, that was cool. I actually, as you were reading that, I stood up and grabbed from my little Zelda shelf behind me the original The Legend of Zelda instruction booklet right here that I have. I'm showing the camera, at least the patrons in Celeste. And I remember cherishing this little manual. It's 3 inches tall by maybe 4.5 inches wide, and you would shove it down in between your cartridge and your little plastic black Nintendo sleeve. And I remember this thing. I would read it over and over and over. When so I did say that Link's Awakening was my first Zelda game, but there were, as a very young kid, there were maybe 2, 3, 4 times in my life where I would rent The Legend of Zelda from the local VHS rental shop and try to play it. I wasn't good at it at all. I'd get a couple screens in because you're a kid and it's a hard game, but I still would read the book and I'd take a look at everything. Now I'm looking at this book right now and it's 45 pages long, Celeste. This little pamphlet, 45 pages.
Oh my gosh.
It includes a full map of the overworld. It includes a couple pages of just the story, actually many pages of just the story, a breakdown of the enemies, your move set, all the different items and how they work. And then it gives you tips and hints to get all the way up through the second dungeon, all just in this little book right here. Isn't that crazy? Times have changed, haven't they?
Lots of love in those manuals.
Yeah, it's really cool. I suspect that the reason the manuals became less exciting or important is, honestly, I think one of the factors is that as the graphics in the games got better, less needed to be given to the imagination, so to speak. And so when your character is 16 pixels by 16 pixels, seeing a lot of different renditions of the character performing certain actions in the game allows you to kind of imagine and extrapolate what might be going on when you're just seeing colored pixels getting pushed around a screen. And I think as the graphics got better, it was less needed. I don't know. What are your sentiments on that?
I used to love them because they would often include background information and parts of the story. So I used to, or sometimes they would have little humorous descriptions of non-playable characters or enemies and items.
You know what? You bring up a great point. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Impa, here, I'm looking at it right here on page 5. Impa, the character in the original The Legend of Zelda, only exists in the narrative in the actual instruction manual. She doesn't actually ever appear in the game. And so if you were to just play the game, you wouldn't even know that Impa is a character, whereas she's such a critical character in some of the future Zelda games.
Wow, she is. She's evolved quite a bit over the years.
Yes, definitely. Well, anyways, if you'd like to read this final comment over on Discord, I'd be happy to listen. I don't know these comments yet. I haven't seen them yet.
Okay, this is from Sanctuary 1987. Just listened to the Best Items episode, and I think I have an addition to it. I think the whistle/flute from the original was super important to the series as a whole. It's the first thing in a game that I can remember that offers fast travel. I think that's super important to what Zelda became. Thinking of fast travel in Ocarina and Breath of the Wild specifically, it seems like another innovation in the long list of things that Zelda brought to video games in general.
Yeah, I would agree with that whistle. Remember, Dan made a joke one time in one of the episodes. He's like, I don't know, he's probably playing a whistle. He usually whistles something. He's usually playing a flute or something. And it's true. Music-based travel is very common, with the exception of tornado-based travel, which is in Wind Waker. Actually, cyclone-based travel, I guess, technically. Yeah, I don't recall using the flute too much as a kid when I played it. And when I play it on the Mini, on my NES Mini, or I play it these days, I don't use it too much, but I think it is. Did you know that the sprite for that whistle, or the tone for that whistle, is the same tone in Mario Brothers 3? You're nodding as if you do. Oh, look at that smile. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Whenever you play the warp whistle in Super Mario Brothers 3, the do 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 do, that's the same tune that Link plays in A Link to the Past.
That's awesome. My mind just got blown, Celeste. On air, Kate May just text me.
Oh,
Kate from the show just texted me right now. It just popped up as a notification, and it's a very exciting one. So we'll leave that. We'll leave that as it is for now. But that's really, really cool. Anyways, It was just nice to see her name pop in here, and nice to read her sentiments about the show and the show moving forward. So with that said, yeah, the fast travel's cool. I don't actually use it that much personally, but I kind of play Zelda games weird. I kind of love doing the thing where I don't purposely try to make Zelda games difficult for myself, but especially in Breath of the Wild, I really get a kick out of not warping at all. I really like the concept that you have to walk somewhere, and if you want to go, if you're over at Rito Village, you really got to think about if you want to go to Hatno Village or not. You really have to consider, do I really want to go all the way over there? The only time I warp a little bit is if I really am stuck on like some kind of boss character and whoops, I just don't have enough arrows. Sometimes I'll justify a quick warp into a town to pick some things up and go back. I don't know. How do you feel about fast travel in Zelda games?
it just depends on what I want it to do.
Yeah.
How patient am I feeling that in that moment?
I don't think it's bad. I think it's definitely part of the gameplay and intended to be part of the gameplay. One thing that I think is kind of nice is that at least Zelda will kind of limit the fast travel to like special points. Oh, and that reminds me, the Link's Awakening remake on Switch, they added a couple additional fast travel points because the original Game Boy one, I think, only had like 3 little vortex tubes that you could kind of warp around. And in the context of Link's Awakening, I actually think the additional fast travel points is a positive. And this is why. I remember playing the original Link's Awakening, and because you only get these 3 points, you almost explore the land less, because every time you're warping, you get centralized on just one of these 3 spots. So you very rarely get to the edges of the map, or you very rarely, it's a real hike to get away from these warp points. And every time you warp, you're kind of funneled back into a central spot. And when I played the Link's Awakening remake on Switch, there were some additional warp points that Grezzo added in. And I found that enabled me to explore some of those lesser found areas a little easier. And I think it encouraged my exploration in that case. Well, kind of the opposite of what happens for me, like in Ocarina of Time or something like that. Mm-hmm. Celeste, let's do it. Let's head over to Patreon.
All right, I am there.
Cool. So we sent out a little message only about 4 days ago. And we heard back from a bunch of people. I literally have the Patreon page up in front of me right now. I think we do the Patreon comments first, and then a couple people left a few extra comments via this YouTube link that I sent, and we'll get to that too. So, Celeste, let's see. Why don't we start? Let's start with Ethan. He was the first one to message us. Ethan Lindgren is one of our supporters over on Patreon. He says, for David... certainly, Celeste, you're welcome to answer this question as well. For David, what kinds of episodes, I see now, i.e. top 10 lists, development history, lore, are your favorite to host and why? I can answer that, Ethan. I have a lot of fun with all of our episodes, but personally, the ones that I personally get the most excited about and I find I enjoy the most are the ones where I'm able to do almost an hour-long essay on the making of one of the games. I've only done 2 of those episodes in the show's history. I did one where I spoke to Kate about essentially everything I could find out about the making of the original The Legend of Zelda. And then the next season, I did one more episode about the making of Ocarina of Time. And I love doing those episodes. I do take a couple months to collect as many notes as I can. I try to go more than just hitting the Wikipedia page. I try to pull facts out of old interviews. For the Ocarina of Time episode, there were some Iwata Ask interviews that were more current, but questions were asked in them of the original Ocarina of Time making. And I just put a bunch of notes together, and I try to do my best to tell a story, usually in chronological order, in development order, to whoever's listening. I think both those episodes, it was with Kate. I got into this podcast. When I approached Kate about making a Legend of Zelda podcast, I was coming at it from the perspective of game design. I really enjoy game design and the nature of how games are made, and as technology increases and even the restrictions of technology, I get really excited about that stuff. In fact, when we started Another Zelda podcast, Celeste, I didn't really care about the lore at all. I didn't, I really kind of looked at a Zelda game as like, okay, here's the water temple, and this is why the water temple exists for these mechanics. And here's the mechanics of the hook shot, and now we're in the lava temple. And okay, we need 4 more temples to appreciate this next, kind of. I was always looking at the bare bones or the structure of the games, and I didn't care as much about the story. And now, 3 years into this podcast, I'm like completely committed to the lore and the story of these games. So for me, creating those development history episodes are my favorite. If this were a full-time job, I'd probably do one a month. But right now I'm doing like one a season because it does take it. I do try to give the game a little bit of respect, and I try to build my own, even though I source a lot of sources off the internet, Celeste and Ethan. I try to build my own narrative and then re-communicate that to whoever my co-host is on said episode. Other than that, I will say as a quick comment, the top 10 lists, as I kind of said in the beginning of this episode, were a surprise to me. Initially, I was less excited about doing them. I thought they were maybe a little bit like a sellout thing because everybody does top 10 lists, but I have found that they're actually a really great way to have conversations, as I said in the beginning of this episode. So Celeste, for you, what's your favorite? I know you're a big fan of the show even before you became involved with the show, and now you're much more intimately involved to the point where in which you and I are deciding the episode types we're going to have for season 4. What kind of episode category do you find the most fulfilling for you as a listener, Celeste?
Probably lore. I love learning more. I like deep dives, and I recently, a few months ago, I wrote an article about the Garuda where I was just doing research on them and learning so much about them.
Yeah, I enjoyed that article. I thought that was wonderful. I think, I just realized in this moment, I think you and I going forward as we co-produce season 4, I think we're going to have a really nice balance of episodes, because certainly you're going to bring some lore-based episodes that I wouldn't even considered, and hopefully I bring some technical-based episodes, and I think we're still going to have our top 10s and our favorites and all that kind of stuff. But I'm really excited about what we put together. There's a couple topics that, just a little bit behind the curtain here, listeners. Celeste has already started providing a couple episode ideas to our kind of shared file that we use. And there's a few, Celeste, where I'm like, oh my goodness, I never ever in a million years would have thought of that topic. And it sounds great. There was one in there, it was like the different motherly figures in Zelda games. And I never would have thought about that. I think that's just wonderful. All right, let's move on here. Simon Strom says, let's see, what are some other Zelda creators you enjoy? Podcasts, YouTubers, or whatever. Celeste, I'll let you start with this one, and I'm going to think about it a little bit.
All right, I have a list on my phone.
Oh, really?
All right, let's get
saw
started.
This one already? Okay.
Zeldum, Hyrule Historian,
Yep.
Hyrule Gamer, Zeltic, Book of Medora Podcast, Zelda Dungeon, Zelda Universe, The Era Without a Hero, Aaron Grubb, he makes music, Amy Turk, she covers Zelda songs, Commonwealth Realm, Lowell Legend, Major Link, Masked Nintendo Bandit. Those are the ones I have.
Holy moly. Wow, Celeste, that's great. Wow, that's exciting. That's wonderful. What are some other Zelda creators you enjoy? I'm very proud of Andy and what he's doing with Zelda. I think that's really awesome. I do kind of dive in and out of Zeltic's videos. I think Zeltic's doing some wonderful things. I'll binge 4 or 5, and then I kind of won't watch for a month, and I'll go binge a few more every time Zelda puts something out. As far as Zelda creators, so there's a podcast called Tandem Legends that's out there, and they started their podcast almost the exact same time we started making this podcast, Another Zelda podcast. And it was really fun in the early days to listen to their show. And Joe and Shannon, I believe, are the two hosts' name. And Tandem Legends is doing something almost the opposite of what Another Zelda podcast is doing. And that's actually why I really enjoy listening to Tandem Legends. Whereas Another Zelda podcast, where we might do category-based episodes where we talk about all the fire dungeons through all the games or something like that. Tandem Legends, they are literally playing through the timeline game by game and dungeon by dungeon, doing one episode, basically one episode per dungeon through all the games. They're up to they're in the middle of Twilight Princess as of this recording. They're choosing that timeline for now, and then I guess they'll cut back to Ocarina and maybe go Wind Waker and then maybe go the other one. And that's just a real pleasure to listen to because it's such a saturated look at every single little piece of Zelda games, and they Joe and Shannon go almost off the rails with some of their lore deductions that they'll dig so deep at a certain point it's almost becoming like sometimes they'll speculate so much that it's almost becoming its own version of fan fiction, and I love it. I really think Tandem Legends is doing some great things. We reached out to them way back a couple years ago. We had a couple listeners say like, "Oh my gosh," because some listeners found Tandem Legends and found another Zelda podcast right around the same time there, Celeste. And we had a few listeners kind of reach out to us saying, "Oh, you guys should do a crossover." And if Joe and Shannon ever were up for it, the thing is, it's a little off their format, so I think it'd be hard for them to justify some kind of crossover episode on their show. But it would be a blast to have them over here on another Zelda podcast sometime. Nevertheless, I have to be honest. When I'm clicking through the clicks, when I'm scrolling through my podcast listener, when I'm hitting YouTube, the most consistent show that I listen to is Tandem Legends for me. I think there's some other really nice things going on out there as well. I poked around on Chat of the Wild for a while. I thought they were doing some nice things. Those gentlemen were up to some cool things. But for me, I obviously listen to our show just to make sure everything's going well, Tandem Legends, and then YouTube, it's a bit more disparate. I subscribe to a bunch of different Zelda channels, but I kind of let the algorithm... I'll confess, I kind of let the algorithm present Zelda episodes to me, and then I'll watch them in that way. I don't fully subscribe too much on YouTube, Celeste. I get a lot. I don't know. I get a lot more excited about watching episode. I watch a lot of channels where guys and gals will like rebuild controllers or break a controller apart, and I really like the technical videos on YouTube. Honestly, that's the stuff I really get into. I love that. I love watching controllers get rebuilt. I love it when there's one channel, and I don't remember the name right now so much, but it's like the Offset Gamer or something like that. And he just takes a look at ROM code and just breaks it down, and I absolutely love his channel. The Displaced Gamer. I think it's called The Displaced Gamer. And last but not least, the YouTube channel that I look forward to the most over the years, even before making another Zelda podcast, the one that I can't wait for this gentleman to make more episodes every time he does, is The Gaming Historian. I absolutely adore that YouTube channel. And it's great. It's great. Those episodes are comprehensive. They're right up my alley of the kind of stuff I love when I do these behind the scenes making of episodes. So that is my super long answer, Simon. Celeste was much more succinct by planning ahead, but nevertheless, at the end of the day, if it's Zelda specifically, Zelda music, there are not hundreds, but there are tens of, within the tens, like 20 or 30 different artists that I absolutely love and enjoy. I've personally built 3 Zelda-based playlists that are officially public and out there on iTunes right now. You can actually, we've never said this, but all 3 of those playlists are links on our website right now. If you go to our fun stuff tab on our menu, I actually have links to all 3 of those playlists. They're dynamic playlists that I continue to add to. I've put Aaron Grubb on there. He's wonderful. I really enjoy his work. There's Lo-Fi Leah has some amazing kind of jazzy renditions of Zelda songs on there. My favorite, I made one that's basically just a bunch of Zelda covers. I made one that's kind of beefed up, almost like club style music, and it's kind of like a workout playlist. It's really good for biking or doing workouts. Celeste, I'm just telling you about these playlists at this point. But my favorite one is one that I made for when you're working, and it's kind of like lo-fi Zelda stuff. It's stuff that kind of exists in the background, some jazzy stuff, some kind of like trip hop kind of Zelda stuff, and I very cutely titled that one "The Wind Worker." I was very happy with my title. So it's Another Zelda
That's
Podcast
cute.
presents The Wind Worker. All of these playlists are available on iTunes because I absolutely adore listening to Zelda music. Anyway, let's move on. Jeff Gepper here then asks, he said, what is the most frustrating place you remember being stuck in a Zelda game? For example, that moment when, after hours of wandering around or trying to defeat a boss, you cave in and look at a player's guide or walk through. Celeste, do you have any of these moments?
Yes, and I'm very embarrassed by it. Very embarrassed. When I was a kid, we used to rent Super Nintendo games every Friday, and A Link to the Past was one of them.
Yep.
Could not for the life of me figure out how to go to Aghanim after he transports Zelda to the Dark World. So fast forward to when they ported the game to the Game Boy Advance, and I received it for Christmas that year, like 2002, 2003. I finally looked it up when I got to that point because I had no idea. Spoiler, if you have not played A Link to the Past, you have
hit
to
that 30-second forward button. Hit that 30-second forward button. Okay, go.
You simply have to go to the wall where he disappears and use your sword to slash the curtain
Oh my gosh, that's right. That's right.
and go into the room and fight him.
Oh my goodness.
Yes,
Fair enough.
that's-
My most frustrating Zelda game moment is also A Link to the Past. And I experienced it recently when we were doing our review episode for the end of season 2. I completely 100% missed the Moon Pearl. And I know that this is an issue that a lot of people have because you can technically leave the dungeon without the Moon Pearl. And I went back into the Dark World and I was walking around every which way. I was warping back and forth. I thought, surely there's some kind of tile I'm not standing on correctly. There must be some way to get around this clever because when you're the bunny or whatever, you can't go through the little pegs that are sticking up out of the ground. You can't go through a lot of things. And I thought, well, it must be a warp puzzle. I was thinking this must be a puzzle where I have to go back and forth between the lands. I'll figure it out. Dang it. No, not at all. That was the one time where I truly broke down and ended up going online and looking for what I was missing. And then I saw like some unofficial comment somewhere about like everybody misses the Moon Pearl because you can technically leave the dungeon without it. And so I went all the way back into the dungeon. I think I have a recording of this on our YouTube channel right now. And I didn't make a big deal of it on the recording, but I went back in, grabbed the stupid Moon Pearl, and then left, and everything was fine, and the game kept going. The only other time I truly went to the internet for some Zelda stuff was after like 100 hours of gameplay on Breath of the Wild. I was getting to a point where I was just kind of like roaming around collecting some of the disparate pieces of costumes that I hadn't found yet. And I will admit, there I kind of started hitting up some YouTube channels of all the cool costumes you can get and like kind of hints as to where they could go. I did a little bit of searching there, and I have a current situation that I'll speak to. I'm currently halfway through the Nintendo Switch Link's Awakening remake. I received it with my Switch for my birthday last April 2020. I got about halfway through. Now, I played Link's Awakening on the Game Boy. Loved it. I've played it a number of times. There's this moment where there's this, I don't even remember the name of the character. It's you're kind of going through this desert area and you're awakening these statues that start stomping around at you. It happens in other Zelda games. And you basically take care of them by shooting them with an arrow and you move on. Shoot them with an arrow, they freeze, you hit them, whatever. Okay, you stun them, whatever. You can technically stun them with your hook shot, anyways. So I'm doing that in the Switch remake, and there's a bit of a mini boss to get a key to go to the next dungeon, and it's maybe the 6th dungeon or something like that. I am at this mini boss right now, and by right now I mean like the last 3 months of my life. I've been stuck on this mini boss, Celeste. There's this big blue pig-nosed guy who's like a big knight. You go into this little mini 2-room dungeon. You obviously are just supposed to defeat this guy. The way I would do it in the Game Boy version was I'd jump with my feather and go around the back, and I thought I used arrows, and you charge up swing slash to hit him. I cannot beat this guy right now in my Switch version. I don't know what the deal is. Like twice a week, I put my Link's Awakening cartridge into my Switch. I'm at that same stinking boss. I go there, like, today I'm going to try a different strategy. Today I'm going to try something. I go in, I try jumping, I try moving. I get my butt kicked every time by this boss, and I have actually gone online to look at like walkthrough videos to see how people are playing it. There's a walkthrough video out there where Link just jumps around to the back and sword swipes and jumps around to the back and sword swipes. I cannot replicate this action. I cannot beat this mini boss in the Switch version of Link's Awakening. I am so frustrated and so stuck. So that is a real life thing that's hurting me right now. Do you know the area I'm talking about, Celeste?
Vaguely. It's been a little while since I played that one. Oh gosh.
Even the Switch one, the Switch version?
Like 2019?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, it's been a
I'm
little
gonna guess
while.
you got past this mini boss based on your reaction.
I am on the last part. I just haven't beaten the game.
Yeah. I think you might be further than I. If anyone listening has any insight, please, I guess, tweet at another Zelda pod, or even tweet me personally at Raptor Paint. Give me some help to defeat this boss. I can't remember its name, but it's one of those things where they give you arrows before you enter the fight. So traditional Zelda logic tells you should probably use arrows in the fight. The walkthrough that I found online doesn't use arrows. It just uses super slashing sword mechanics or whatever. So I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Anyway, let's keep on moving. Otherwise, this is going to be a 900-hour long episode. Mike Westfall then actually asked us, what's the stupidest way you died in a Zelda game? I have to think about that one.
Well, I remember when I first played Ocarina of Time when I was about 9 or 10 years old. I was really curious whether Link would actually drown at the bottom of Lake Hylia if I equipped the iron boots and just left him in his green or red tunic instead of the Zord tunic.
Wow.
He does drown. I was just curious. I was morbidly curious. I let the timer run out.
Oh my gosh. Stupidly die. I think my answer would be that I might have two quick answers. The first thing that came to mind was the way that I stupidly die in the original The Legend of Zelda, whenever I'm playing the original. Of course, that game doesn't have 8 direction controls. It only has 4 direction controls. And if you're swiping your sword, you can't turn in that game during a sword swipe. And oftentimes in the original, I get a little too panicky and I start button mashing that sword, and I can't move Link around appropriately. I can't turn him appropriately, and I really need to I'm not a button masher by nature, but sometimes with that game, the enemies are coming from all angles and there's not a lot of AI, so they all just kind of come at you. And sometimes I'm hitting that button. I don't play the game the way it's supposed to be played. I try to play it the way I want to play it, which is pushing the button over and over and over. And usually I get hit many times, and that's usually how I die in The Legend of Zelda. My kind of honorable mention to that is a similar thing that happens whenever I play The Adventure of Link, Zelda 2, and whenever I'm in a real sparring moment where you're sword fighting there's a whole sword fighting mechanic in Zelda 2, which is actually pretty intriguing and pretty cool if you can master it. Sometimes I get a little button mashy there as well, and I have to really slow down and try to use strategy, which is so funny because usually I really enjoy Zelda strategy. I am the kind of person that brings their shield out when an enemy comes up and waits for the right moments to hit with the sword and stuff like that in the 3D Zelda games. But sometimes with these older ones, I get a little panicky, I guess, and start swinging away, so I got to be careful. I don't know if that's a great answer, but like a stupid way to die, the reason I say that it's the stupidest way I died in Zelda games is because I think it's so fixable, Mike. Like, it's just like I need to calm down and just play the game, right? But no, I've never had like an accidental death that was frustrating, nothing like that. A few times I would fall off Skyloft in Skyward Sword, and I would figure like, well, there's my death, but then of course they just scoop you back up with the bird and you're fine. That's my answer there. True. Later on, Adriel Munger. Ooh, this one's for Celeste. Celeste, why don't you read this? Adriel Munger gave us a question.
For Celeste, can you talk a little about your journey getting more deeply involved with AZP? Going from a fan of AZP to a friend of AZP to one of the creators on AZP. Whoa.
Dude, this is great. I didn't see this question. I love this, Adriel. Thank you. Celeste, let's hear about it.
Gosh, I don't know if it was 2017 or 2018. I had just started really listening to podcasts at all, just discovered the world of podcasts on Google Play, and I would listen to them while working, and I was curious whether any Zelda ones existed, and lo and behold, another Zelda podcast exists. So I start listening. I love the episodes. I love the camaraderie between Kate and David. And I start following them on social media. I messaged David on Facebook when I was using Facebook, just complimenting the show, asking him questions about podcasting. And in 2019 is when you wanted to start with bloggers, right? Blogging?
Yeah, it's true. And you know what? You just reminded me. Initially, you just had general questions about podcasts because initially you kind of had a concept for a show yourself. And I was very intrigued by the concept. You were essentially going to interview members of a town to, through the course of a season, build a picture of this, a story-based picture of this kind of town. And I thought it was just a wonderful idea. Maybe that's still in the future someday. But that's what really, I think, got you and I starting to chat beyond just the level of, hey, love the show, cool, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's... And then,
Celeste, I just remembered. That's what it was too then.
Yeah.
At the time, Lizzie was the editor for the blogs, and you had expressed that you'd done a little bit of writing, and I said, well, I'd love to have written content on the website, and I think I kind of sent you towards Lizzie, and then you started writing, and then Lizzie's life went such a way where she wasn't able to contribute anymore, and we found Shane, and at that point, I kind of asked if you would be inclined to be the editor of the blogs, and you... If I may, you basically said, I'd love to.
Yeah.
And then this ball started rolling.
Yeah, I write for a living, and it's not like an author for books, but different types of communication. And it's fun to have that exercise with writing about things you enjoy with Another Zelda podcast and video games in general. But yeah, then... we started growing. We have Shane, we have Carlos. Lizzie wrote an article. Then last year you mentioned Mallory or MJ Kuhn, and let's see who else jumped on.
Well, her husband Ryan writes a beer blog, and that's actually what brought Brothers-in-Law into existence, the podcast Brothers-in-Law. But he contributed a few times, and then it just keeps growing. People keep contacting us, and we have to grow slowly. I don't want to take on so many people wherein which it's too much work for you, Celeste, or we can't support it. So we do have to kind of slowly bring people on. But boy, it's been a real exciting journey. There's like a solid 10 people at this point involved with all of this.
Yeah, and it's right now we do at least one blog post a month, but if people are so inclined, if they have a timely idea, they want to get it out, we can do bonus blog entries. But I think that's what I can handle right now. One a month.
Well, now we're bringing you on as a producer of the show, so that those responsibilities are all going to exponentially change anyway a little bit. But anyways, Adriel, that was a great question. It was fun for me to listen to that one. The next question is from a Celeste Roberts, and she says, "Y'all rock."
Oh, I was just commenting on all the patrons. I was like, oh, thank you.
No, for sure. Well, let's move on down to Melissa Hillard, who just about a day ago, as of this recording, said, she asked, if you had, I have not seen this one yet, if you had to assign a piece of the Triforce to 3 different NPCs from any of the games, who would have each piece and why? Basically make a new trio, not including Zelda, Link, or Ganondorf, and based on Melissa's question here, they have to be existing NPCs, and let's say, Celeste, that they have to be from the same game or game universe.
Oh no, you just threw me off.
Okay, let's not say that. Let's say fantasy. Let's say Fantasy Town. They can all come together in a real Mario Kart style, Smash Brothers style fashion, where it doesn't matter what storyline or universe they're coming from. Who would be your 3 picks? Okay,
Power would be Gabora, the blacksmith in the Mountain Smithy and Majora's Mask, the one who just goes, "Roar." He doesn't really talk, but he is verbally abused by Zupora, I think the little dude's name, kind of runs the shop. He's huge. I would like him on my side if I were ever in a fight. So I would assign him Power. For Wisdom, I would do, this was, to me, I could not pick this person. It's the Hashrala from A Link to the Past.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Mm-hmm. who communicates with you through telepathy. Very smart, very wise, knows
that's your
so much
wisdom?
about the sages. Yeah, that's my wisdom.
You know, that telepathy angle, Zelda uses the telepathy thing all the time too. That's cool. I like it.
And for courage, I picked Selmy from Breath of the Wild. She is the one in the Hebra Mountains who has that little cottage, and she's known for her shield surfing on the mountains. She braves the cold. She snowboards on her shield. She just seems so capable and so willing to take on difficult tasks.
Oof, that's cool. I like that. I might try to pick from a single game just to reel this in. I love that. I love that trio, Celeste. Let's see. So which game should it be? I'm inclined to just do Ocarina because it's so classic. If I had to reassign power, wisdom, and courage.
That's
So,
task.
if it was Ocarina, I'd be giving courage to Saria immediately. And then let me think about it from there.
Huh. This is really difficult because
Well, no, honestly, I feel like in my wisdom, it would be Kaipora Gabora right off the bat, but or Raru or whatever. But let's switch this up. The power one's interesting because the power also leads to a little bit of corruption. So who is already leaning towards corruption in Ocarina of Time? Oh my gosh, it would be what's his name? Ingo?
oh yes, the Ingo who takes over the ranch.
Oh, maybe
For a
Malin
little
needs to be one of
while.
these.
Yes,
Who's our wisdom?
he takes.
Maybe someone else's
takes over the
wisdom.
Who's smart?
I'll go with
I-
this for the sake of this episode. I love the idea of Saria being basically adjacent to Link and being a courage, and then you know what? Let's have fun. Not the Raru version of Kaipora Gabora, but actual owl version Kaipora Gabora is our wisdom. And
owls are wise. That's what they
yeah,
symbolize.
okay, maybe that's a bit on the nose actually, but I'll go with it. And then Ingo, I think, is the candidate for the most after Ganondorf, the most evil person in Ocarina of Time.
He's
don't know
not
if
my
that's-
favorite.
I don't know if that's totally true, but I could see it happening. All right, so anyway, we have 3 left, and I'm gonna run out of videotape here, memory on my card if we keep going too long. But this is an absolute blast, Celeste. I'm loving this. Sean Biddick actually asked, does Ganon hurt the series by being the recurring, ever-present antagonist? I have a lot of thoughts on it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. Does Ganon hurt the series by being the recurring, ever-present antagonist? For me, right off the bat, no, I don't think so. I like the kind of reincarnate Ganon and reincarnate Ganon, not Ganondorf, I guess, based on our conversation earlier in this episode. I don't mind this concept of the power, wisdom, and courage being this repeating essence that manifests every couple hundred years or whatever in different ways. There was an episode that I did over on Studio Demands It where TC and I we were tasked with by ways of the context of that show, we were tasked with coming up with a new Zelda game. We came up with an idea of of a Gerudo actually being assigned courage one day and what would happen if that happened. And we had a blast with that episode, but it really one thing that I learned from recording that episode with TC, even though it wasn't another Zelda podcast episode, is that I really appreciate the Triforce being present through the games. And whenever we have a game where there's a different baddie, I'm fine with it. It's the Oracle games. I mean, technically Ganon shows up at the end under certain circumstances. Or some of the 3DS ones or the DS ones where I think Bellum is kind of the main bad guy or something like that. I can't remember the exact name of that creature. It's fine.
I think so.
They're fine, but they lose a little bit of that. They lose a little bit of power for me, actually. That's also a bit on the nose. I'm not trying to do clever wordplay. I like the idea of this kind of destined 3 and how those 3 relate to each other. Does it have to be Ganon or Ganondorf every time? I guess to that I would say no. but I think there needs to be like this kind of repeating nature of the Triforce. For me, I find rewarding. I don't know. How do you feel about it, Celeste?
I think it actually forces the writers to be more creative, because if you're stuck with these three people who are just bound by destiny, bound by fate to be around one another, you have to think of new ways to bring them together and tell their story. And I love that. It doesn't take it away from me because they keep coming up with all these different ways. And again, I do love Majora's Mask, for instance. But I think I find that's a little different because it's after Link has finished the events of Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you're right. 'Cause the Triforce is not the Triforce, the capital T Triforce. The idea of the Triforce is not particularly present in Majora's Mask. I will say, just as a thought experiment, if in I love that Ganondorf is in Twilight Princess. I love that it's the same Ganondorf from Ocarina. Blah 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 blah. I actually thought it was kind of a cool. I liked that it's Ganondorf manipulating. Was it Zant to do all these things? But I'll be honest, if the main antagonist were Zant and we were to learn that Zant had power, I don't think I would have minded. I just like that. It's not so much. I guess it's not so much that it has to be Ganondorf. I just like or Ganon. I like that there's a power element. Now, there are a couple times where it's like, there are a couple Zelda games where you think it's one bad guy, and guess what? It actually is just Ganon. Okay, fine. Maybe they're lampshading it a little bit. I don't know. I hear you, Sean, on that sense. But for me, it does not weaken the games, I would say, for me.
Not me either.
Cool. So Alyssa, who is one of our patron Patreons, but also a fellow AZP family member, so to speak, crew. She most recently was in the Top 10 Bothersome Baddies episode. We invited her to be in the Spooky Spots episode, but she just didn't quite have the right time to record her submissions. Nevertheless, she asks, what original Zelda games would you like to see be available on the Switch? I hope they do something special for the 35th anniversary of Zelda, honestly. So, what original Zelda games would I like to see be available on the Switch? For me, the quick answer is, of course, put Twilight HD and Wind Waker HD on the Switch. We've already got the controls, we've already got the thing, but I feel like that one's almost obvious. For me, I would be very pleased. I think it's a hard ask, but I would love it if Grezzo just went right ahead and put Oracle and Ages using the Link's Awakening engine that they built for that Switch remake. If they just went right on and did an Oracle and an Ages remake, I would be so pleased because I love both those games. The reason I say it's a tough ask is because it is, the rights are different. It's a different production company. Capcom made those. It would be maybe a little difficult. I don't know. How about you, Celeste? Do you feel like Ocarina of Time 3D needs to be on the Switch or something like that?
Now that you're talking about remake.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say not just, the original Ocarina of Time on Switch is like a given. Of course we want that. But I'm trying to think of officially released maybe remakes or something.
I would like to see a remake of the original The Legend of Zelda and Zelda 2. I have not played either of those, really, just a little bit here and there at a friend's house when I was growing up. But this is my hot take. Some people might not be happy. I am not inclined to play those.
Yeah.
I know. I'm horrible. I'm the worst Zelda fan ever. I would love to see them remade.
Yeah, that'd be cool. One of my favorite original remakes ever is the Metroid Zero Mission game that was a remake of the original Metroid game. And the original Metroid game is playable, but barely. I don't think I'm being unfair when I say that. It is a tremendously difficult game to play. You really have to master it. And that's fine. That's cool. But what the Metroid Zero Mission did is it brought the game into a space where it was still very challenging and interesting, but the mechanics were playable. It basically used the Metroid 4 engine, quote unquote. It was a side scroller, but it was a really respectful remake that used everything that was there originally. The story stayed there, added a few things on, a little bit like that GameCube Resident Evil remake. I think that was a wonderful way to do a remake.
So good.
So if there was in that vein, if the original Legend of Zelda were to be remade, in that vein, I think I'd be on board. I think I would definitely be on board. We would still be able to hold the original in a special place in our hearts. It could still be difficult to play. You could still slash that sword and not be able to turn. But, one thing that's interesting is I have played the Zelda battle system version of the original The Legend of Zelda. The map is slightly different, but it's basically The Legend of Zelda done with 16-bit sprites and 16-bit gameplay. It's cool. It's cool. I like it. I wouldn't mind a Super Mario All-Stars style, even just graphics upgrade to those two originals. Maybe make a few of the mechanics a touch more playable. Or maybe you just do something like, maybe you just tweak the save system. So something that happens in The Legend of Zelda 2, or Zelda 2 rather, is that, Celeste, every time you hit a game over, you genuinely go back to the beginning when you get a game over. And it can be rough. There's some things persist, but you basically go all the way back to where you start. And so you can be really discouraged sometimes when you only have 3 lives and blah, 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 blah. So maybe like a tweak, maybe a little bit of a fast travel system thrown in there just to make that burn a little less hard. I'd be up for it. I think that'd be super cool. Mm-hmm. I mean, you already have the first 3 on the Switch via the Switch Online stuff. You've got links, Zelda, Zelda 2, and A Link to the Past. But what original games would you like to see available on the Switch? I'd have a lot of fun. I'd play Twilight Princess HD in a heartbeat on the Switch. I just played Wind Waker HD for the show a season ago. I'd hold back on that one a little.
Skyward Sword.
Yeah, I've said it so many times on this show. I want to love Skyward Sword. I love to love Skyward Sword, and it's hard to love Skyward Sword. And you know what I mean? That would be cool if they could remap some of those motion controls to even just some of the Breath of the Wild stuff, where maybe it's executed just with tilting the Switch around a little bit. You fly your little bug flyer without holding that Wiimote out in front of you, but maybe you can just fly it by kind of twisting the actual system.
Yes,
I could stomach that. That'd be all right with me. Mm-hmm. The only thing that's tricky about Skyward Sword is they had so many combat mechanics where you have to slash sideways, you have to slash vertical, you have to slash angled, that I don't know, would they map that to an analog stick? Would it lose some of its... They could... Okay, so Skyward Sword didn't really have a camera system, so maybe that does free up the right analog stick to be sword slashes. I don't know.
That's a good
Last
point.
but not least, let's finish this episode off. Zeldum, Mr. Andy himself, asks us 3 days ago, he asks us, this one's a tough one, Celeste. I don't know the answer to this. Love that nerd shelf you've been building. Oh, right. Okay, that's something different. That was about a video I made. So, Ganondorf in Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, and Twilight Princess is known to be the same person. Woo? Wind Waker, Ganondorf? All right, let's keep going. The same person, not reborn or reincarnate in any way, same guy. Now, Andy knows his lore. Maybe Wind Waker Ganondorf is the same one from Ocarina. Hopefully, this isn't a spoiler for Four Swords Adventures. But how do you feel about Ganondorf being reincarnated into another Gerudo in Four Swords Adventures? Personally, I think it messes up the timeline even more, and Nintendo ruined the dramatic ending of Twilight Princess, where Ganondorf is killed for good, rather than sealed away. But I'm curious on what your thoughts are. If this is a spoiler, you can't get made, David and Celeste. This game came out in 2004. Okay, fine. I still am ready to lend it to you whenever the lockdown situation eases up for you. Yes, I don't own Four Swords Adventures. We will be doing a Four Swords Adventures episode the second we can get 4 of us together, and Andy will definitely get 4 Game Boys together and the GameCube, and we'll play it, and it'll be awesome. It may or may not be able to be on this camping trip we try to do later this summer. Maybe it'll be a different time. Celeste, Ganondorf in Four Swords Adventures. I never beat Four Swords Adventures. I played it. I played many levels of it back in the day when it actually came out, but this is news to me.
I've never played it. I'm so sorry, Andy. You can message me after you listen to this episode and let me know how disappointed you are in me. I have it on the Game Boy Advance port of A Link to the Past, but...
Well, now, and Celeste, I don't want to actually you, but that actually is a different version of Four Swords. So that is Four Swords, or Legend of Zelda Four Swords or something. Four Swords, and it's a very quick game. Four Swords. I think you can play the whole thing in an evening. whereas Four Swords Adventures came out a year later, and was like a fully fledged multiplayer game. A lot of times, even myself, sometimes it's easy to forget that those are two separate experiences.
Well, thank you for that. I learn something new every day.
Hey, we'll still do an episode about Four Swords. That's great. I mean, we'll get 4 Game Boys together and all of that. I did find a used video game shop here in Chicago just yesterday. I was there, and they had 3 of the Game Boy Advance Link to the Past cartridges, and I hesitated to purchase them, but I think I might pull the trigger on it just to prepare for our Four Swords episode whenever that happens. I don't know, Andy. What's really throwing me off is his comment about the Wind Waker Ganondorf being the same from Ocarina of Time. Andy / Zeldum, he knows his lore. He knows what he's talking about, so I trust him. But I always thought the Wind Waker Ganondorf was a different corporal being. I really did.
I did too.
Four Swords Adventures, I don't know, maybe it exists. I know it's right there in the timeline, in the official timeline. Ganondorf, if I'm to understand you correctly, Andy, and Ganondorf is reincarnate in a Gerudo, maybe we could write that off as it's just his spirit coming back. Again, Andy, you actually know more about this than we do. I think it doesn't diminish the fact that Ganondorf who's killed off is probably the zombie Ganondorf, the corpse of a Ganondorf that we see in Breath of the Wild 2. I'm still in it. Emotionally, I'm invested. If his spirit, if I have to do some headcanon and say that his spirit gets entered into a Gerudo in Four Swords Adventures, I'll go with it. But that's where I'm at with it here, off the cuff.
No. I have nothing more to say about it. I'm so sorry, Andy.
Fair enough. Celeste, this turned into a monster episode. I think if we ever do another one of these AMA things, that might have to be an episode unto itself. Or maybe we start doing that as a YouTube video. That could be fun. Anyways.
That would be fun.
Celeste, thank you so much for hanging out with me for this episode.
Thank you for having me.
I can't wait, eventually, hopefully only a few months from now, to literally drive down to Louisiana and record a couple face-to-face episodes with you. I can't wait to do a couple more group episodes, perhaps to have you up here to Chicago and we can do some kind of big live quiz episode. I know it's in our future. I look forward to making season 4 with you. And thanks for joining me for this Hey Listen episode.
I really enjoyed it. I love all the feedback. I love the Ask Me Anything questions. Thank you guys who participated.
Now, if people want to reach out to you on any social accounts or anything like that, is there anything you'd like to share?
I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Fairy Crypt. And we also have another Zelda podcast Discord.
That's right. You are kind of taking the reins over there for me, and I truly appreciate it. I do dive into the Discord, honestly, maybe once a month, and that is not that bandwidth does not allow me to engage as much. There's so much chatter. There's so much talk going on, which is what the point is of a Discord, is to create this secondary community where conversations can happen adjacent to the podcast. It's different than like a Twitter account or something that's like hyper-focused, like an Instagram account or something like that. And so I'm really pleased that we have that Discord account. And Celeste, I'm so pleased that you, and also Shane, he likes to get in there and exist. Maybe we can appoint him as an official, what would it be? An official...
Community
captain?
Manager type?
Community manager. I like that. He's really active on Twitter too. Maybe we bring Shane as a community manager. Nevertheless, people can find us on Twitter at Another Zelda Pod. You can find us on Instagram at Another Zelda Podcast, or go to our website, anotherzeldapodcast.com, where you can find all of our blogs that Celeste has edited and many of our other people have written. We're really growing quite a library over there. It's very, very exciting. You can also check the show notes to our backlogs, all of our previous episodes, and get a couple links to our Patreon account and some of this fun stuff like the iTunes playlists or the Apple Music, whatever, Apple Music playlist that I mentioned earlier. And that is that. You can find us on YouTube. You can listen to our episodes on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And I think I'll end it there. Celeste, this was an absolute pleasure. It went 150% longer than I thought it would, but I should have known. And it's so funny. We were worried we didn't have enough listener feedback when we started recording.
I know, but thank you guys for this fodder. It really helps a lot.
I like this AMA thing a lot. I think we do it again sometime, and I think we just do it as like a YouTube video episode sometime. I think that'd be a blast. Anyways, thanks everybody. Thank you for your support during season 3. Thank you for your openness to all these different formats that we're experimenting with and trying, some through necessity, some through creativity. I think it's made the show better, and I think when we return to season 4, we're going to have an even fuller and more complete and fully realized show, something that wouldn't have happened if we wouldn't have gone through these challenges of season 3. Super excited about it. There it is. Celeste, have a good one.
You too. Thanks, David.
I'll talk to you in a couple days.
Bye.
All right, bye everybody. Oh wait, Celeste, why don't you do the honors here? Hey, Celeste, until next time, I'll see you, okay?
Okay, bye.
There it is. Thank you.